We're starting. Here we go. Logging in to chapter 19, social media. The relationship between game devs and social media has changed over the years. It went from casual places that devs might talk shop to the number one place to promote your studio's works and advertise games, especially if you're in indie. I know we're not talking about that here, but if you were to research social media in regards to games, you're pretty much just going to see 80% documentation on how to promote your indie game by way of social media and become your own, community manager. Basically, everyone mentions becoming a brand and posting as often as you can, and this is the lens through which most folks will see and speak on social media. Let's discuss it from a slightly different angle than as a marketing tool. When applying for a job in game dev, this can affect your relationship with social media in major ways depending on your previous behavior. It can also affect your future usage once you secure a job with a studio. So really what we're getting into is your relationship with social media, this, whatever, Blue Sky, Twitter, anything, once you are working as a developer within a studio. As mentioned previously, if you're an asshole and heavily discriminatory on social media and a prospective employer sees this, it may bar you from getting any further with your application. I shouldn't have to explain why. If you're foolish enough to connect yourself with illegal activities on your Twitter or hint at them, again, this may bar your application from moving any further. If you slander game companies and complain about their games nonstop, guess what? Potential employers at game studios might not feel you'll play nice with them. And this, even if you're not looking for a job, this can cause a lot of issues. I worked with a developer that when Elden Ring came out, they decided to voice their opinion about it in a very negative and colorful fashion, which normally would be fine, except they essentially used their social media as a mouthpiece for the team and development on the team and promotion of the team. So then it felt like the entire team was saying this thing, and it was put in games journalist articles and caused us a lot of trouble for about a month. This means if you currently work at a studio and slander your employer, this can cause trouble for you and also look bad to possible future employers in game dev. Now, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't be honest or open about what your employer does. This is just reminding you that these things have consequences. With that said, your employer cannot legally prevent an employee from talking about their job conditions or bad public company decisions on socials. This is important. You need to realize there are legal ramifications for some things you divulge publicly, but there are rights that protect you within the United States for when you speak about specific things. This is more a matter if you want to make this your problem or not. Hey, speaking of what you cannot be legally prevented from doing, under the National Labor Relations Act, employees have the right to discuss their wages with anyone, and this remains true on social media. Something that you'll encounter a lot at some companies is management telling you never discuss your wages with other employees. This is more of a social issue because you may not want to do that. It can divide, it can make things uncomfortable, but I personally promote having that discussion with people you know so you can compare wages and understand, are people being paid fairly? And management doesn't generally want this to happen because then they can't obfuscate the fact that they might be paying one employee far more for less and paying one employee far less for more. So you can't actually legally be stopped from discussing your wage. Now, you don't want to be divulging other people's wages left and right, especially if you are in management, but that's a bridge to navigate. If you do decide you want to take it to your employer on social media because you got that fire in you, do it outside of work hours when you have the greatest amount of speech rights. Because remember, when you're on the clock and you're being paid, you're contractually obligated to do and not do specific things. When you're on your own time, they don't own you in the same way. If you post against your employer during work hours, they can claim you should have been working instead and use it as grounds for a punishment that is actually an obfuscated retaliation. Don't take this to mean you cannot be fired for your social media posts, because you totally can be. Most of the time, if they need to trump up something else, they will. So again, choose your steps purposefully and with intention. Legal protections are highest when you speak honestly regarding work conditions, harassment, pay rates, union discussions, unsafe working conditions, illicit actions by your employer, and in support of other workers. Very important. Remember that those are your safest bets. Check your employer's social media policies, generally covered in the paperwork you get from HR when you start your job. And if not, ask about it. You can always ask about it. You won't be given the side eye if you ask about it. It's honestly good practice to kind of know even just what is the feeling of what your company is comfortable with. Some aspects of social media remain the same whether you're looking for a job, have a studio position, or not. You don't have to be your authentic self on socials, but lying constantly won't get you far. I say it a lot and repeat it here. The industry is smaller than people tend to think. I hate games and I think devs should die in a fire. Well, let's just get rid of that fucker. So when you work for a known company, divulging where you work on socials can net you just as much hate as it might get you praise. You're putting yourself in public, you know what I mean? And you're letting them know where you work, and you, in many cases, are letting them know what you work on. And people who play games are people like anyone else, and the internet and anonymity and all of that lends itself to incredibly toxic behaviors. So a lot of quote unquote gamers love to target devs for their frustrations or take the latest games media hyped issue straight to your doorstep and tell you to go off yourself. Make an educated personal choice whether you want to post about where you work. For me, when I worked at Blizzard specifically, that netted me a lot of negatives and a lot of positives. And the negatives often outweighed the positives, to be quite honest with you. People will hold you accountable for all kinds of stuff that you have no association with whatsoever. When C-suite messes up, as often they do, as you are part of that machine, people just hold you to that same kind of standard and suggest that you were just as guilty of whatever they have done that you did not do. I worked in management as well, which caused a whole other problem because being in part of management, they're like, oh, well, you're the devil. You couldn't possibly be doing anything good, et cetera, so on. Honestly, the result for me was I made the decision to no longer talk about where I work. I don't divulge the company I work at any longer. I don't talk about the work that I do in specifics, and it just kind of keeps it cleaner. This may or may not work for you, but it is a consideration for you to make, and the consequences are yours to weigh. Many jobs will still ask for your social media, but not for portfolio purposes. They just want to look into you. You are never required to give your social media out when requested on a job application or by managers. In fact, you can feel free to say you don't even have one. This includes if you're asked during interviews. And I've had people ask, well, if you do have one and you say you don't, how does that play? It just plays slightly awkward for a moment, and you simply follow up if they find it with, I didn't want to divulge that because I like to keep my work separate from my personal life. And if anybody pushes on that, that's them being weird. Since we're on the subject, an employer can factor this into their hiring process, but would you really want to work for a place like that anyway? Further protections exist in some states. For example, in California, an employer cannot ask for your username or login details. They can't ask you to pull up your social in their presence or to disclose what is on your socials either. This doesn't mean they won't figure it out on their own or it won't be found during background checks. Public facing is public facing. If it's there to be found, it can be. And to be quite honest, they're asking it probably will be. So just be prepared for what that means. If that's a problem for you, just make your accounts private. If you worry that employers will see it anyway but wish not to share, simply say you have socials but you like to keep them purely personal and it shouldn't have any bearing on your job. And again, if it does, or if people pressure you, make the choice then and there. Is this the type of person you want to be working for or with? Because if that's how they treat this issue at the beginning, things are going to probably get pretty bad later on. Social media won't normally be the way you are contacted for a job, though occasionally devs and recruiters will make job postings on Twitter, etc., with portal links to apply through. This is actually becoming a little more prominent, oddly enough, even more so after I wrote this, because more and more people were getting laid off and more people realized that they wanted to make job postings. Dev circles on like Blue Sky, which has a bit more positive vibe to it than say Twitter does for obvious reasons. So people are feeling a little more comfortable trying to see if anybody's there willing to share their interest in jobs and make job postings. This does not mean you have a 0% chance of getting noticed on social media. Feel free to mention you are job searching and post works and portfolio pieces, links to your portfolio, etc. Mileage varies here. When I was looking for work and I posted on social media, I just had some buddies going like, yeah, cool. And that was it. All my interest came from elsewhere. But again, that's me. And I have kind of a under the radar presence relative to a lot of people. So especially if you kind of make yourself well known on social media, if you're looking for work, that might be one of the best places for you to post. Just don't expect that that's going to always be a thing, especially if you don't really get a lot of play on social media. Maybe unlikely to happen, but it won't hurt. Really, that's kind of the crux of it. It's just another avenue, like why not? It was mentioned in previous chapters, but when looking for a job, be mindful of what you post on social media. Don't post slander against games or companies and then expect other companies to want to work with you. This goes twice as much if you land a job in game dev and you keep doing this. It's obvious, but I say it anyways, because every time I say it's obvious, I encounter somebody who's like, oh, I didn't think about that. If you get hired, remember that you should not be representing your company or your team on social media, regardless of how much clout it gets you. There are exceptions to this. If you're like a lead designer and you make an account to simply be like lead design at Gameplace and you're like, I'm going to do my AMAs here or whatever, and it's all cleared with the company, that's fine. But you as an individual on a team shouldn't just immediately go, I work at, chapter19.com and now I'm going to just talk for everybody on the team. Like that's bad for a lot of reasons. It's bad for your relationship with your team, but it also can get you in legal trouble. So much clout, though. Tell me what everyone thinks. Nah, we're blocking that shit. Nope, you do not represent your company, and you do not speak for your team. Hi again. Socials are a space for your personal opinions, and acting as though what you say speaks for the entire company can get you in deep shit. If you want to promote beyond the obvious cleared promotions and excitement for what you work on, you got to clear that with your company prior to posting. Don't just do AMAs and divulge company information for funsies. Hey, here's something I encountered on a team that I worked on, where we had a head of design who went and did AMAs without clearing it with the team whatsoever and started giving company secrets away. That was problematic for a lot of reasons and got them in a lot of trouble. And then we had to actually work on all those things because they were publicly promised by somebody who was prominent on the team. And this is a professional who had worked in the industry over 14 years, and they just didn't know better because they got addicted to the idea of, oh, I'm being listened to, and oh, people are like, I'm a master designer now. And it's like, yeah, well, you made a mistake. Talk with appropriate folks at your company to see if that is cool with them or not, and be very careful not to divulge anything under wraps. Follow your NDA. They don't just disappear because you're talkative on Twitter. And you're going to see a lot of crosstalk on this, likely online. You're going to see a lot of people who are like, oh, NDAs only matter so much here or whatever. When you sign a contract and you agree to the terms of that contract and you say, I will do this and I won't do that, that has very serious legal ramifications when you break it, whether you think it's unfair or not. If you think it's unfair, don't agree to it. Because this isn't even about what you think feels right. This is about what's going to bite you in the ass later. Leaking sensitive information on projects under wraps is going to result in breach of contract. Occasionally, companies want employees to be given media training so they understand how to officially speak on company matters, and that includes how you speak on socials. When I was hired into 3 of my jobs at major companies, 2 of them gave media training and 1 of them gave social media training. It's actually very important to just cover the basics of what they expect you to do, not to do, and also security concerns. If you're unsure about how to talk about something job related, then just don't risk it. Saying nothing is always an option. Socials like Twitter and Blue Sky are not replacements for your portfolio. We went over this briefly in a previous chapter. Don't use it as a portfolio. It doesn't matter if you put a bunch of art there. It doesn't matter how great of a brand you are or how many followers you have. Posting personal art on socials will not hurt you. Posting work related to a studio job might put you in a situation where you have to remind people you don't represent the company you work for or with, but honestly, that's quite easy. You just don't act like you represent the entire company and you go, here's a thing I worked on for this project. I'm proud of it. That said, when you're able to post stuff, it's a great way to get more out of what you did for your job. Never a problem with being proud of what you worked on. When I worked on Hearthstone specifically, this was great because we did 3 expansions a year, meaning anything you worked on within 6 months was going to be public. So then you could just post it. Granted, That's not the type of art a lot of people responded to for me, you know, card backs and UI stuff and, you know, concepting for that. But it felt good to have it in the game that swiftly and also be able to just kind of post the artwork and be like, here's something I had fun painting on or whatever. You just simply don't go, I created all of this myself and ignore the fact that many other people worked on it and so on. Having a not safe for work social media presence will not bar you from studio jobs. A ridiculous amount of artists in game dev draw porn. This doesn't mean everybody does, but there is a lot of talk about, oh, if I post not safe for work, will this bar me from game dev jobs, etc., so on. Man, if it did, I don't think we'd get any games made anymore. It just becomes one more reason not to share it with potential employers and expose them to it. I mean, general rule with adult work, right? Don't bomb people with it when they aren't expecting it. Don't just willy-nilly throw porn at people. That's low class. Don't do it. Socials can be a great way to network with other game developers. You can get to know devs, ask questions, compare your approaches to theirs, and create a rapport. Use socials as a portal to other devs' projects and streaming accounts. You can learn a lot by interacting with them. I mean, honestly, especially if you haven't gotten into development before, talking with devs or seeing dev streams or whatever is a really, really great way to get a feel for how different people think about different things, get exposed to pipelines, et cetera, so on. Me talking about this, someone else talking about their game dev experiences on Twitch, et cetera, so on. You're going to find that there's a lot of differences between them, right? Because there's a lot of companies and even teams within a single company can have a completely different working environment. So it's good to get a taste of what's out there and discuss with people and maybe even get your work known. Just make social media a better place by not being an aggressively annoying person. Devs are busy and sometimes do not have time to interact or answer questions. Don't take those situations personally or get weird about it. Blocked. Maybe it's time to log out. Have you got any questions? This is Q&A. Are there any questions about this? It's pretty straightforward, but we can get through it. We good? All right. Nice and easy. We good. Let's move on.